Welcome to All Things in the Name of Love. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks. Welcome to another episode of All Things in the Name of Love. And today I have with me a special guest who is a soul sister that I've known for at least 10 years, probably more. She is a divine sister. She has done incredible work as a DJ. She's known in band as Puma. I know her as Tiffani. And she's just a divine sister. And I just saw her last week and felt this pull to have her on the show because I just love you. And you're amazing in many, many aspects, but I'm just grateful that you're here and I'm grateful that we get to share this space together.
Oh, thanks so much, Sophie. It's so good to be with you and
Yeah.
to be here. It's an honor to be a guest on your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm getting the first question is I know, but nobody else does, a little bit about your spiritual journey.
That's a very broad question.
I know it is.
I'm like, okay, yeah. I'm like, is that, yeah. I don't, where to even start? I mean, just a part of the day to day. I mean,
Hmm.
eternal beings on this eternal journey doing the work. And for me, I mean, I appreciate the introduction as a healer, as an entrepreneur, as a coach, as all of the things that I embody in this form is really my journey is to I'm devoted to the divine and being in service in that way and supporting um humans myself included in creating spaces, whether it's through dance or one-on-one healing or coaching or whatever that is, to create safe and sacred places for folks to really dive into whatever is most up for them that needs their loving attention so that they can be more empowered and free. And me
Mm.
too. That's my journey is to continually liberate and set myself free from the attachments, from the wounding, from all the
Mhm.
things, and embrace my humanity along the way and have a good time.
Yeah. And that is such a beautiful balance because I actually had this awareness come in the other day where I'm not I am used to choosing myself and there's layers that I'm still learning that. So my former partner came into onto the coast. We saw each other yesterday. And there's
Mm.
part of me that loves my self-isolation. I readily admit it. So, and I know there's going to be like the great shakeout thing in Oregon on Thursday with the earthquake thing. And so the house that I'm staying at told me that there's going to be like a tsunami evacuation drill. And I thought it was yesterday. So I sent it to him and I'm like, "Hey," and I'm noticing that like I'm coming up with an excuse not to see him.
Mm,
Not because it's him, it's just I don't want to like interact with those people. And
sure.
he looked it up and showed what it actually was, what day it was and what the things were, and then he called people to find out where it was. I'm like, "Oh my God, you're like being obsessive." And then I saw the wound.
Mm,
I saw the wound. The wound was, I will come up with an excuse instead of saying, this doesn't feel aligned for me right now. I will come up with an excuse to deflect choosing myself as a pattern instead of just honoring the fact that I am choosing myself. So I called myself, I felt it. I was like really present with myself. And then I called myself out with him and he was like, wow, that's vulnerable. I'm like, yeah, that's accountable. Like, because I have to call myself out on my behavior for myself. And since you're the one that gave me the trigger, I thought I'd share it with you. And he was like, yeah, I'm not used to that
mm,
because we're not taught to accept that, that journey of like, oh shit, I saw something I couldn't see before. I'm not going to shame myself for it. I'm going to be present with it. And yeah, that's like,
yeah.
I'm noticing how The word that's coming through is disruptive. That is to most beings that I've encountered where I actually am present with my feelings.
Well, yeah, we're not taught to be with our feelings or really feel them in a tangible, helpful way,
Mhm.
generally speaking. And so it is, disruptive, it's challenging, and we don't always have to share our process with everyone
Right.
else. Like we get
Oh,
to be
right. Yeah.
stuff and learn how to be like, oh, this is what's here. And we're taught, a lot of us, especially women, but most of us are taught to be nice, little
Mhm.
people pleasing, and a little bit here and there, and at various levels. As a reforming people pleaser, I know this one well. We
Me
don't want
too.
to hurt people's feelings, and we don't want to make people uncomfortable, and we don't want to be that guy that like makes things weird or hard or says the thing that needs to be said. But we have to tell the truth,
Mhm.
and we get to tell our truth at
Mhm.
whatever level,
Yeah.
right? Whatever level, and there's places and spaces for how and what and all that. But it's also our job to honor ourselves. And we talk about this on the dance floor quite often when we're talking about like consent,
Mm.
and if you're going to dance with anyone else, they may not want to dance with you, and it might look like a no, but it's a yes to themselves.
Mhm.
And I love that metaphor so much for life. I mean, there's so much from the dance floor that is such a life thing, where it's
Yeah.
like no to someone else is really a yes to me. And if
Yeah.
you can remember that, it's also easier to honor and be like, oh, you're just saying yes to you? Cool. I'm gonna try not to take that personal. We all have our
Mhm.
rejection wounding, right?
Right.
Um, but we also get to do whatever we need to do to honor
Mhm.
ourselves.
Yeah.
With integrity. And that's with everything that's said, there's like a lot of nuance and a lot of like, it's more than
Yeah.
just like, I can do whatever I want. That's true. And I also could
And
show up with the values that matter to me: in integrity, kindness, compassion, love,
Mhm.
care, fierceness.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
love and compassion are not passive, they are not
Mhm.
weakness. It takes a lot of strength and grit to be kind and gentle and tender,
Mhm.
especially when the world is weird.
Yep. I get that so well. And one of the things I noticed yesterday was how how challenging that can be when you see somebody in their wounded state and still have the compassion and have the bound I don't even want to call them boundaries. It's just like the choosing self
Mm.
because not that boundaries has a bad tint to it, but like it's different than choosing the self, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess I think I hear what you're saying. I mean, boundaries, we talk boundaries, right? We're always talking
Yeah.
about now. Um, what are boundaries other than just an awareness,
Right.
right? And an awareness of an edge. Boundaries, not walls. Those are different.
Mhm. Mhm.
And boundaries are choosing ourselves, right? What's the saying?
Yeah.
Like boundaries, it's the space where I can love you and myself at the same time.
Mm.
That boundary is. It could be a very
Yeah.
thin one, it could be a very deep one, or whatever that might be. But it is the space in which I can love this other thing, person, and
Yeah.
myself at the same time without
Yeah.
compromising who I truly am.
Mhm.
And that's different than being inconvenienced for the sake of another,
Mhm.
or to be in service, or whatever stories people want to tell about that. But boundaries are just an awareness that there's an edge.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like when it's a nuance between the so I'm noticing within myself when sometimes I feel it's a boundary when it's actually an expansion for me. It's like both the boundary and the expansion within myself, like, oh, this is a pattern, and that pattern is a wounding. And now I get to remove that pattern and see what's beneath that pattern and question if the boundary is just me protecting myself and the wound that I don't want to feel, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And I mean, I just saw that the other day. I'm like, "Oh, wow. Wow, this is a people pleasing aspect."
Hmm.
And it's like, I don't want to, I don't want to claim that I'm choosing myself because I don't want to hurt anybody else. I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. Didn't see it. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like, oh, I didn't see that level of it. And the grace that I felt of just being present with that without shaming, that's
Mm.
a big thing because like when we start this journey of learning to love ourselves and choosing ourselves, there can be a lot of shame.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true. I've experienced that, especially as someone who's been, a counselor, a coach, a healer for over 20 years in this work and still seeing things, right? Me too. I'm doing the work. When seeing things that we haven't been able to see before and then feeling shame for feeling it,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, again, back to that point, like we are often, especially our generation, not taught how to be with our feelings. In fact, we're taught not to.
Mhm.
Like, to be ashamed of our feelings, right? Like what I'm sure you've heard this. I heard this as a child, like, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about.
Mhm.
Even as a child, I was like, I'm crying, I got a reason. What I don't
Yeah.
understand what you're telling me right now.
Oh.
Um, and so the disentanglement
Mhm.
and the deep shame, and shame is its own teacher,
Cool, yeah.
right? It's, feelings, emotions are just a response to human life. There's nothing wrong with any of them. But we
Mhm.
can learn to be like, ooh, there's shame here. Okay, what can I do with that? Or how
Yeah.
can I be with that? Or how can I love this aspect?
Mhm.
And shame is a deep, it's one of the, right, one of the lowest feeling
Yeah.
vibrations we can experience as a human.
Yeah.
And it's got its medicine.
Yeah. It definitely does. It's I think it's one of the deepest programs we have. I'm like tuning into it because like the amount of things we have the opportunity to be ashamed of, um, with the confines of societal structures
Mm.
is, I mean, Puritanism was a was a thing. I mean, it's very, very prevalent on the East Coast still. And
Mm.
to come from that society, like a crazy thing, like something as simple as sitting in a hot tub naked with one of my girlfriends. Pooh, that took a lot of courage for me to do that
Mm.
because I had to work through the programs of nakedness with another human being in a non-sexual way as being okay.
Right. Yeah. We get a lot of shame around our bodies,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's all here for us.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the reasons, with why dance is so important, I find. And dance, beyond the like, there's any steps or anything to like do or be, or it's not a performative thing when I'm talking about like ecstatic dance and sacred dance, but it's a rewiring and a relearning of how to be embodied and in our bodies
Mm,
for all beings, for all genders, because we are given so much shame, and
mhm,
there's deep programming, and then our experiences bring that in. But that's where that kind of movement and learning how to be in the body and be okay
yeah.
with whatever is, whether it's shame or grief or joy or sensuality, and rewriting the story, because we get so stuck in our heads, right? Our whole culture is about
Mhm,
being in our heads and over intellectualizing our feelings and beingness. Lots of doing,
mhm.
coming back to being and embodiment in a real way, which doesn't mean losing our minds completely. There's
Right.
also that kind of like, oh, I'm so out of my mind, I'm just in my body. But I've seen this on the dance floor too. I'm like, you're not really fully embodied, because you're like, it's part of, like, the mind
Yeah.
is part of our experience.
Right, right.
Terrible master, but is a great tool
Mhm,
for
mhm,
all that we're doing. And so that's when I talk about embodiment. Because my I guess business, embodied magic, is helping folks embody their magic, a variety
mm,
of ways, so that we're all shining
Yeah.
our stuff. And there's so much, I mean, there's no perfection here. But
Right.
feeling into that, moving with it, dancing with it, literally, figuratively, in all the ways.
Hmm. I remember what back with the in the COVID when you did the online dances.
Mm,
Oh my God, my soul needed that so much. So much because I didn't know I was still in Portland and I didn't know about ecstatic dance
mm,
and you introduced that to me and it was like, "Oh, I can move my body. Oh my gosh. How amazing is that?" And I can honor myself and feel myself. What a crazy concept and it's been pivotal in helping me unwind
mm.
so many levels of gifts to self-accept on a deeper
Mm.
level.
Yeah, it's also fun.
Yeah, it is
You
fun.
know, we
It's
talk
fun. It's
about the
playful.
healing work, and sometimes it's like, oh, it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of attachment and baggage
Yeah.
to that word. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it's just laying on the floor and
Right.
sobbing or doing whatever. Like, it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be anything other than being present.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the most important thing. And presence has been I review I 4 years ago I did my free analysis on the gene codes and
Mm.
I forgot about it and I was recently reminded of it. So I looked them up again and my there's like four that we get and the fourth one is like my life purpose is presence. And I burst out laughing. I was like, "Oh, no wonder why it's been so hard."
Yeah, well, I mean, again, we live in a culture of distraction.
Yeah.
Everything is a distraction.
Hmm.
Especially these days, right? Like, we have
Oh.
smartphones and all these things happening and pulling for our attention, and there's like this social media and this news thing and this disaster or drama or whatever. There's so many ways, binge watching,
Hmm.
consuming all the things, and it takes a lot to, kind of pull our attention back
Yeah.
and go against the grain in some ways and be like, I'm not actually, that's not feeding me. That's actually not
Mhm.
nourishing. That kind of consuming isn't nourishment
Right.
in any way, to the body, to the mind, to the spirit, to the heart, any of it. Um, and that's really kind of some of the rewriting the story of, like, one of our greatest currency is our attention
Hmm.
and what we give our attention to and what's
Yeah.
running in the background in our subconscious and those thoughts. We are such we're receivers and picking up other thoughts or other ideas. Even if we're don't consider ourselves terribly sensitive, we're still picking that stuff up even if
Yeah.
we're not aware.
Right.
uh,
And then the more you come back to you and avoid the distractions, like I notice if I get overwhelmed, my first tendency is to distract. That's just it's just a pattern.
right.
And so the perk is because I've done so much work on myself, not only do I catch the distraction, I get bored with distractions now, which is like, yay, progress.
Yeah, I hear that. Like, I used to be such a social media scroller. I'm like, ooh, what about this? What about that? Now I'm like, about after 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, I get the content I need, and then I'm kind of like over it
Yeah,
pretty quickly, most of
which
the
is
time, not all the time.
no, I get it. I get it.
And in the distraction piece, I mean, part of it, when we hit overwhelm, like you said, when we hit certain walls or ceilings, like, it's a survival mechanism to be like, "Ooh,
Hmm.
this is too big to feel, or I don't
Right.
want to," right? It's the program. It's usually often our wounded child being like, I don't know if I can handle this.
Right.
Or just capacity is limited for whatever reason. And so it's I think a natural way to be like, ooh, let me just distract myself, disembody, whatever,
Yeah.
dissociate.
Yeah.
We also can be wise in how we do that
Right.
and notice we're like, ooh, I'm at capacity. How, what do I need right now?
Hmm. Hmm.
I need a break. Maybe I go outside instead, or put my feet on the ground, or go dance, or Maybe get
anything.
on social media and look at cute animal videos or dance videos or something. Like there's nothing wrong
Right.
with any of that, but it's also just how we are using these tools that we've been given.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because even the biggest distraction can be a tool if we use it well for ourselves.
Right. No, I get that. Like I had this yesterday I was up in Warrenton because that's where the Natural Grocers is, and I love Natural Grocers. And I'm looking for canned pumpkin. Now,
Mm,
I have been baking pumpkin for myself since I was in my 20s.
mm,
Like I love fresh pumpkin. I should grow my pumpkins. I like grow, bake, puree, and make. I mean, that's just like a thing. Well, I couldn't find it, and I'm like, wow, hi lazy, because like literally it's like 5 minutes. You cut the pumpkin open, you scrape the seeds out, and you bake it. Like that's how hard it is to do this. It's like ridiculously easy. And and I really like it's October and I haven't had my pumpkin things yet. And I'm like, I okay, so today I had time and I could have distracted myself. But instead, I mean the pumpkin's cooling now. I just cut open I did the thing and it was like, okay, that was like 5 minutes of my life, maybe 10 minutes because I had to like
mm.
rinse the pumpkin seeds just so I could cook them.
Right.
And and it's like that felt so much more nourishing to me than the thing I was going to distract myself with. So it really is a conscious choice of like when you feel that tendency, and it's just catching it, it's not judgment. It's just like
Yeah.
because we have that, our society is like, as a kid, I was like paying attention to myself all the time.
Mm,
The technology has changed our ability to tune in as much as we used to.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so easy when they're even if it's just the energy of, right? Like I don't have a TV in my house. I haven't in a long time. I certainly have a computer. I still watch things when I feel called to, but when I travel, I cover up the television
Mm,
because it is just this big glaring thing that's like, pay attention to me.
right.
Right? There's an energy, there's frequencies, there's all these things that seen and unseen, right? That are always
Mhm.
vying for our attention.
Yeah.
And to, and it comes back to just the practice of like, ooh, what do I notice right now?
Mhm.
Notice what you're noticing.
Yeah.
It's such a funny thing. I say that at dance often before and after. I'm like, just notice what you're noticing here. And whatever that is, be present with that
Yeah.
because that's what's wanting our attention. And sometimes, it is a practice and a dance of learning to tune into what's our intuition, what's
Mm,
our higher wisdom, what's our guidance versus a wound.
yeah.
Um, and also just it's all just part of the journey back to that spiritual journey of like, what is here? What will be nourishing to me today? And, if for folks who are on that path, not everyone's going to.
Right.
And that's okay too. Like we're all here with our own journeys. That's not about trying to
Mhm.
control anyone else's experience. Not taking it personal, although we do have our attachments and our people and the things that
Mm,
pull at our own wounding of like, why can't you see this? Right. Anytime we're in any kind of relationship,
right.
that is a mirror and
Yep.
also a gift.
Mhm.
Whether it's with a beloved or with a friend or our karmic people that we're here to do some work with,
Mhm.
it's all here for us,
Oh,
even
yeah.
when it feels crunchy and challenging or crazy making, as sometimes happens. I've been through some stuff in this last year. Where I'm like, what was I thinking? And also, thank you.
Yeah. I
And
totally
here's
get
my
that.
boundary.
I totally get that because it's like, you know, sometimes when we follow the guidance, often when we follow the guidance, we have an opportunity like, "Oh, yeah, sure, I'll do this." And then you do the thing, and then all of the stuff that you didn't see before shows up. Like this journey of me traveling around Oregon, it's gifting me the opportunity to spend time in places I've never lived before, and I'm so excited about that. And I'm realizing how much I love home
Mm,
and being present with that and being present with the, huh, okay, well, I am the home, right?
absolutely.
And in addition to that, in order to do all the things I'm here to do, I need a base, whatever that is.
Mm,
And then I can travel wherever I need to, but like to come home to something, even if it's a shack, if it's a tent, if it's a yurt, whatever it is, to be able to come home to that is settling. In not in a like lowering myself, but like settling to my nervous system.
mm. Sounds like safe, like a creates a sense of safety.
Yeah.
I think for most of us, that's kind of when we're looking for, trying to define home
Hmm.
for ourselves beyond maybe like what home was as a child or something, right? Like what
Hmm.
is home? I That's what comes up is like, oh, where do I feel the most safe?
Hmm.
And again, that's also our job and our journey is to like one we are always safe when we're
Hmm.
connected and doing alignment and in many ways. And I don't say that lightly, knowing what
Right.
happens in the world and my lived experience and trauma and all the things
Hmm.
that come with that. But it is our job
Oh yeah.
to find that and not be like, you need to keep me safe, person. But we
Right.
can make requests of our people, of our close
Hmm.
relationships of like, I'm really triggered by this. Is there a way we can find a way? But home,
Hmm.
that sense of home, right? Like we feel really
Yeah.
where we can be relaxed. Like my whole body is like, oh yeah, I'm at home.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, I'm at home in my home. I know you're traveling. Um, but coming back to that, like, oh, where do I feel safe to
Yeah.
be?
Hmm.
Not like safe where no one's gonna hurt me, because that still is kind of a
Yeah,
wound, but
that's
that safety of like, oh, I can just be relaxed and be my full self.
hmm. Hmm.
And we all deserve that place and
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. And like I should say like Oregon coast, man. Like Oregon, got like, oh my God, it's like it's fun to feel the energy so keenly. Like
Mm,
when I was in Bend, I felt a deep, like, oh my gosh, this feels so good to my soul.
mm,
Here, oh my gosh, it feels so good for my soul. My soul is like really like, yeah, Oregon.
mm.
Just it's there's something so freaking magical about this state. And I know I'm like, don't really want to tell other people that, but I just did.
Like, just kidding. I mean, it is a thing, you know, we have our soul resonant places.
Hmm.
I mean, Oregon's awesome, but everyone's got their places.
Right.
And I think that's also a learning of like, it's not about being in the coolest city or
Right.
all that, but where are we called to be? And sometimes we get called to places we never expect.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Or yeah, as I know you know, and I'm in a place where I'm like, am I being called? Am I being called back to California?
Yeah.
Um, you know, and it's we just like we have soul connections, contracts with other
Hmm.
beings. We
Hmm.
also have that with land and places
Yeah.
and spaces for those of us on that path where we're there to go support and be supported by
Yeah.
a land. And we don't know until we do it, until we show up. Same, it was the same with Bend for me when I moved here
Hmm.
7.5 years ago. Because it was the same. I'd been in California, I've bounced back and forth. I was ready to come back to Oregon after being in California for some family stuff and moved back to Portland area, which is where I'd been living previously, and it was not the place.
Mm.
Not the place. That was clear. The city had changed. Everything had
Yeah.
changed from 2013 to 2017. And
Mm.
tuning in and guidance from my mentor, I was like, I know Oregon is the place. She's like, yeah, but not Portland.
Yeah.
So some guidance came down to Bend and just had all this synchronicity and all these things and signs. And it felt like home for me and my
Hmm.
now former husband. And we were like, yeah, Bend's the place. So we moved here without knowing anyone. I think I was technically unemployed, but then picked up some work and he changed jobs. He got a job here. It just everything worked
Hmm.
to bring us here. And I I could not tell you what my life would have been like.
Mm.
I never even heard of ecstatic dance before moving here. And now I've technically retired from Bend ecstatic dance to expand into some other dance offerings and movement.
Mhm.
So we never know.
Right.
You never know. And go, man, as humans, I know you know this, is we really want to know. And we're
Yeah.
like, well, if I do this, is it going to? And then anxiety or whatever comes in, it's like, well, I don't know all the things, so I can't make a move. It's like, well, we have to take a step.
Yeah.
And it's really one step at a time. And then we get more information or things expand in ways we never can imagine.
Mhm.
It's like this recent thing for me where I'm like, am I being called back to California? That was not something. Like I was ready to retire here. As I'm looking out my window at all the beautiful fall foliage and
Yeah.
um, just leaning in,
Yeah.
noticing where there's resistance. I think you said something earlier about boundaries. I'm like, sometimes it's just resistance.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're like, ew, nope. And that's a really natural, right? Like resistance is a
Mhm.
natural part of change, or it is a thing that will protect us. And
Right.
we just can learn how to be curious. Be like, ooh,
Yeah.
I'm resistant to this. What's that about? Is it because this is a big no? Is it because this is an old pattern? Or is this something that feels scary but maybe isn't anymore?
Right. No, I totally get that. I totally get that. Like when I was guided to Orcas last year, it was like 6 months of me feeling it and then me finally being like, "Okay, I don't even have the money to do this. I'm going anyways." Like it
Mhm,
was that strong of a pull.
mhm,
I didn't have a place to live. I didn't know anyone. I just went. And I'm so grateful I did. I talked to Source because I am Source. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. It's gotta be easy because this is massive expansion for me. I'm like taking off and leaving to a place. I mean, I've done this before, but I've always had a place to stay. So
mhm,
this was just a big expansion. And back in 2020, I remember like tuning into the decade and I saw me jumping off of cliffs the entire decade and
mhm,
landing. Every time I landed, it was like a softer landing. The cliff was bigger, the landing was softer.
mhm,
So it's like this expansion of surrender for me into like this experience was like I remember like looking at apartments and hearing, why are you lowering your frequency?
mhm,
Like I didn't know an apartment was lowering my frequency, but then it was like, no, go. You need to spread your light right now. I'm like, okay, don't really know what that means, but okay, I'll surrender to it. And then everything fell into place. And I like scheduled myself out with almost absolutely no gaps for 2.5 months of house sitting because that's the guidance. I'm held, I'm taken care of. I'm like so grateful. I get to hang out with animals and no human beings if I don't want to. I mean, that's like perfect for me. I'm like, we'll do that. Um, and it's for some sort of expansion in trusting.
Well, it is that trust. It's building trust with our intuition,
Mhm.
source, whatever you want to call it, with the universe, with God,
Mhm.
goddess, and building that trust and creating, I know attachment theory is so popular these days, and I feel like that's important. But people get a little attached to the attachment theory, but like creating secure attachment within ourselves and with the divine
Yeah.
within us, and that's all around us. And that's like, for me, living spirit led, right? This back to your original question about spiritual journey. It was a very spirit led life, and it doesn't make sense to a lot of people.
No.
Um, and not that I'm out there doing very crazy erratic things. Sometimes it seems that way to some, but um, it's it's just I can't go wrong
Right.
when I really listen. Like my intuition is never wrong. When I get it wrong, it's because I didn't listen
Mhm.
or I followed the fear
Yep.
or the wounding
Yep.
or whatever that is. And
Mhm.
again, it's not about being perfect and being like, oh, I'm a saint. Definitely not one of those. Um, definitely not one of those. Um, but the continued practice and building of the trust, just
Yeah.
like in relationship with another human.
Mhm.
Talk about this in my day job all day long about, the foundation of building a healthy team or relationship of any kind is trust.
Mhm.
And not just with someone, another human, another being, or even another animal, as you work
Right.
with animals, but with ourselves,
Mhm.
so that we can continue to trust our intuition and know that we'll be guided even when it's not what our personality wants
Right.
or what we are told we should do, or
Mhm.
if it looks just totally nuts. But
Oh,
we know, and I have stories about when I've willfully ignored guidance and been like, nah, I don't, and went on the scenic route, and there are consequences. It's not punishment.
mhm.
Certainly, there are like, hey, I'm still learning stuff, but it didn't have to be
Oh,
so
yeah.
bumpy. Didn't have to be so bumpy. But
Yeah.
sometimes we like to make things a little complicated and hard.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I have many examples of that. I'm like, "Huh, yeah." Like, when I got married when I was 21,
Mm,
um, my gut for 6 months was in knots, and I ignored it. I ignored it. Like, I got so much guidance, do not do this. You don't need to do this." And I'm like, "Oh, no, I love him." I'm 21 and naive. 9 years later, I realized that because I had this whole lie about promises that I had to work through as well, um, wasn't aligned in so many ways, but boy, was it a great teacher, that relationship. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
And I
now,
could have avoided all of those lessons had I listened to my gut.
well, I mean, you would have probably gotten them in different ways. Like, we still need the
Right.
lessons, but
Right.
uh, yeah, it's we get what we need.
Yeah, we do.
We get what we need, even if we aren't paying attention. We get what we need, right? Spirit will whisper and then it will shout, and then it's sometimes a brick across the face. And we can keep ignoring. It just gets harder. And especially if we are like doing the work to clear and release the stories, the blocks, the barriers, whatever, so that we can be more clear, it gets harder to ignore. I
Yeah.
had this experience, I might have shared this with you last year for Halloween. There's a Halloween dance, and I was like, okay, I'll put on some kind of costume. I actually really love dressing up, but I was like, I literally could not put on a costume. I could not even pretend for funsies to be anything other than who I truly
Wow.
was.
That's fascinating.
And there are things that I'm like, I can't do that anymore. I can't fake it. Um,
I
can't
love
fake.
that. I love that because, like, even something as benign as just dressing up as something else, I mean, it could be an aspect of us, right?
Oh, sure.
But there's that if I need a costume to show my authenticity, guess what? I can't have the costume. I just have to be authentic. And the layers of I mentioned yesterday to my former partner, I'm like, I was anxious most of my life. He's like, "No." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah." I had adrenal fatigue when I left, okay? And he's like, "How did you hide that from me?" And I said, "I hid it from myself. If I didn't even know I was anxious, how could you have known it?" And he was like, "Oh, you're an anxious." I'm like, "Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me." I was, like, totally anxious all the fucking time because I was overstimulated because I didn't know how sensitive I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I repressed it because I didn't know what else to do because, growing up, there were no guides on, "You're a sensitive person." Like, how to navigate the world.
Right. Or if we were sensitive, it was a bad thing, right? Like, oh, you're
Right.
too sensitive,
Right.
or whatever that is. But I think, secret is we're all actually sensitive,
Yeah.
but not many of us, not all of us have been taught how to work with that or that it's a good thing.
Right.
And like my sensitivity is my superpower. It
Oh,
makes
yeah.
things challenging. Like I said, it's sometimes harder for me to participate in things, and I'm like, do I really need to do that?
Right.
Like I don't drink alcohol. I haven't for years. I might on a rare occasion just like have a little taste and be like, ooh,
Mhm.
that's still not a thing that I want, but I'm a curious human. And when I say sip, I mean literal, just like a taste. But I can't go sit in bars.
I can't.
And I can't
I
go
can sit
sit.
in the des. I
Right,
can't.
right, yeah. The Des here in Bend, there's the trend in the non-alcohol
Yeah,
lounges and things, but it's incredibly challenging. And it doesn't mean I can't do it if I'm called to do that, right? We can put up our protection and all the
right,
things, and
right.
I get a little tease, some flack around not going to festivals and things. I'm like, it is a lot of work for me to go and be
Yeah.
in places like that. Not
Mhm.
that I can't, not that I'm too sensitive, but I'm like, I just am aware of my particulars, and I have learned. I'm like, I go where I'm called, and that doesn't mean I don't go places because I'm afraid.
Mhm.
Look, if I was called into a biker bar, I'd show up.
Right.
But it's also just learning to tune in and be like, well, what is here?
Mhm.
And balancing that like human curiosity with like what's going to serve me today, or what is
Mhm.
going to be fun, or what is going to be nourishing, or whatever
Right.
the question. We can ask ourselves better questions. I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
it comes naturally to me as a coach, right? We ask
Yeah.
questions. And so I ask myself good questions. I realized, when I was younger and I wasn't as aware or as practiced or
Yeah.
any of that, I didn't know how to ask good questions of
Oh,
myself
yeah.
or of the universe or of anyone else. And so certainly got a lot of experiences. I was like, what? Okay. Um, and that is part of learning,
Yeah.
like to come back to that place of like, not about perfection. It is a journey. We start where we start.
Mhm.
We start new. We start a little green. We start a little unaware. Some of us a lot more. Um, Sometimes we have to start with talking the talk. I know there's a lot of, especially in the coaching world, everyone's a coach these days.
Mhm.
A lot of people who are newer or fresh and maybe have some inherent skill, but they're not as embodied in their work yet.
Mhm.
And that takes practice.
Yeah.
And I say that because I know there's a lot of, people judgment in the world. I mean, we all have that, but it's also a reminder
Mhm.
to we can be compassionate and we can be wise, and we also get to tune in to who we want to work with if we're looking for
Mhm.
a coach, or
Yeah.
even as a practitioner who I want to serve.
Mhm.
And it's who I'm serving today is very different than who I was serving 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And who I'm able to serve is different because I also was in a different place and more, different experience. Now there's more experience and there's more expansion.
Mhm.
To give ourselves a little more grace in our journeys.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean we can't, like, I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this. We are always learning and always teaching. So even when I speak, quote unquote, out of turn, or I say something, I have a friend that sometimes I say things that are a little snarky. So I've got some of that in my personality. It triggers things. And
Mhm.
it's important because when we're speaking our truth, and even when we're not, we're going to trigger and inspire people.
Mhm.
And sometimes they're really the same thing,
Yep.
just with a different context. And all of it is a gift. And like what I say is mine, how other people respond is theirs.
Mhm.
And I can own when I've said something hurtful,
Yeah.
right? And whatever learning comes out of that for me and anyone else who had the pleasure or misfortune of hearing me um, get to. And that's also just showing up and going,
Mhm.
okay.
Mhm.
And that's still building trust, and that's still
Yeah.
building connection. That's still just being present to what is.
Yeah. And it's such a dance. It's a beautiful dance because when we bring that level of awareness in, like that, oh, everything really is for us. And we get to, if we choose, because there's no having to, nobody's forcing anyone to do anything. It's a choice. Um, how we choose to show up for ourselves, for our relationships, for our day-to-day simple tasks like doing dishes or cooking a pumpkin. Um, where do we find the joy in that? And if we're not finding joy, How can we make it joyful? And if we can't make it joyful, is it necessary? And some things are
Mm.
necessary, right? I mean, let's say paying bills, for example, but you can make it joyful. You can bless the bill, you can bless the
Mhm.
money, you can, like to bring in that frequency.
Oh, yeah, totally. We can find, I say this a lot, especially, I mean, many of my dances will bring people into the depths of grief
Mm,
and into the heights of ecstasy and all, like all of it's available. And even in coaching and counseling and healing work, grief isn't something to be afraid of.
mhm.
Even if something doesn't feel fun or joyful, we can still, the ecstasy of grief is something I talk about, and not as a like,
Mm,
um, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, people take that however they want because
yeah,
grief is just part of the human experience. And it's not always going to be fun.
right.
And I think joy, from what I'm getting from what you're saying, because I think some people would be like, oh, it's, like love and light and rainbows and puppy dogs all the time. I'm
No.
like, it sure as hell isn't.
No, it is not, it is
And it's
not.
okay that it's not. And I think
Yeah,
what's also happening is there's this pressure that everything needs to be good all the time. And I joke where I'm like, man, even when things are hard or weird or just challenging, I'm still having a good time.
yeah,
Doesn't mean I'm like light washing the
right,
experience.
right.
It means that I can find a gratitude
Mhm,
most of the time,
I understand.
not all of the time. Because
And even when I'm not feeling gratitude in retrospect, I can.
yeah, I can at least see, be like, okay, I get it. Or sometimes I don't get it. And I'm like, whatever, I'm just moving forward. We're
Right.
going to move with it. We're not going to ignore it. The only way out is through.
Mhm,
And usually with that kind of mindset, heart set, that shifts it. I mean, we
yeah,
can suffer. We can create a lot of suffering. What's the saying? Like pain is inevitable,
yeah,
suffering is optional.
yep,
And what is pain other than an uncomfortable feeling? And there are various levels and degrees. I'm not dismissing or diminishing anyone's pain.
right, right.
Also, how long do we want to suffer?
Mhm.
I think we can learn to choose how much we suffer or catch ourselves when we're like, wow, I've been in this cycle. How long do I want to suffer? Not a minute more.
Right.
So what have I been ignoring? So what have I been avoiding? If all I've been avoiding is an uncomfortable feeling and I've chosen this pain over that pain, I can choose my heart.
Mhm. Mm. That feels like such a beautiful place to, because I could talk for hours. But it's so I'm gonna ask, how do people find you?
Yeah, if folks are local to Central Oregon, almost everyone has my phone number. But the easiest way to find me is probably on Instagram these days at embodied underscore magic. So embodied underscore magic, or you can email me at Tiffany or Puma at embodiedmagic.org. I love chatting with folks and getting people connected, whether this happens so often, people come to me, I'm like, oh, you're not for me, you're for this thing, or like whatever that is. So I I definitely really relish being connected to the community at large, not just here locally, but embodied magic is where you'll find me and where I will hopefully find you.
Honey, I am so beyond description grateful for this amazing conversation. I'm so grateful for our friendship. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for the light you share in the world.
Mm, mm.
And I love you dearly.
Thank you so much. I'm also so grateful to be here with you and such an honor and such a joy.
Mm.